Welcome. I'm still here in my squeaky chair. But I wanted to go through a little bit of a biblical conversation here. So this is going to be a long one. But it starts off with a video I saw on YouTube from Mr. Astrotheology and another gentleman. And I'll post the link to his site so you can go and see him, because those who don't know Santos, some of his stuff is very informative when it talks about the biblical to understanding human nature, the sun, and all those things. But this specific one talked about a part called meta, and how meta is the awareness of awareness. And it made mention how the observer can't be observed. And that sort of links on from that paradoxical temporal idea I had in the last video of the paradox, and how is it someone observing us from a different reality. But with this one here, I got an idea from the metaverse, which is the Facebook thing. Because if meta is an awareness of itself, or awareness of awareness, then why would Facebook call it meta? Now, they define the metaverse as a persistent, shared 3D virtual environment where users interact with avatars and VR and AR and the internet to create immersive digital experiences. The conceptualized future iteration of the internet is where individuals can socialize, work, play, conduct business, and all sorts of atrocities. So, all these meta glasses and stuff are literally seeing from your eyes. So they can target what you do, where you go, what you see, that is there a sale in your area, or these sorts of things. But see, your awareness of something is how you perceive it. It's what you see, it's what you react. This is why two different people in the same location can have different awareness of their surroundings, because they're looking at different things. So that sort of connection of metadata is the data of yourself and all those things of where you've been. And the metaverse and meta is all about your perception of those things of where you've been and what you've done. A way of controlling you and your awareness as it tries to observe the observer. They are doing the very thing that they've mentioned. They want you stuck because they want your time, your energy, your focus. Because by keeping you focused on the 3D world of illusion, you forget to look inward. You forget to look outward and up, to look at the scriptures, to all the sort of things that beauty is, because they want you to migrate into a false world of transhumanism and digital interaction. Literally written in their metaverse definition. So, when we purposefully intend to better our lives, heal our traumas, we undergo many stages of removal. And one of those removals relies on invitation. Because you see, as we go inward, we remove the toxins, we remove all the problems, we remove all those things of ourself that are keeping us trapped. And we hear about it a lot with the energy vampires, right? And I personally think vampires get a bad rap, really, with some of my heritage going back to Romania. But in this case, we see that one must invite them into our lives. Hence, every time we allow addiction, the scrolling, the social scrolling of TikToks and algorithms, the keyboard narcissism, the greed, the lust, the sloth, we allow that beast inside. We purposely allow it in. It's not a representation of letting someone in our home, but yes, that also as well, because we don't know what they're bringing, but a metaphorical one of allowing the problem, allowing that vampire, that evil into our lives because we are giving it the allowance to do so. We are giving it the permission. We can easily stop it, but we choose to allow it. Now, the video I watched talks about how symbolic nature of the Bible has been misquoted and used as actual realness instead of metaphorical. And it does. People have misquoted the Bible all the time. We don't really know what it is. Maybe it's one thing or the other, right? But they chose the actual death of masculine and feminine instead of an egotistical symbolic death. Now, there's no fact or falsities here. These are just my observations, so don't jump at me. But people have killed in the name of God, in the name of the Lord, because that's what they've been told, because that's what the scripture says, because after all of the reset, people have been indoctrinated to believe this word as it is written, not as it is so. Yeah. One thing, however, if we go on this line of thinking for a little bit, is the similarities between religions and the cult scripts, right? Or the culture scripts. I'm sure there's many more. We understand that when we look into it, right, there's practically all of the mainstream religions tell the same story, just from different perceptions and different names of people. We know the gods are all the same being, they just have different names. But some of the stories are the same, but haven't really been given the light of day. And I found a similarity here between two. So one of them is in Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So I'm going to read a few passages here. Don't bite my head off. I've just got it from the internet. But it reads as such. In the Genesis account, God reveals to Abraham that Sodom and Gomorrah are to be destroyed for their grave sins. Abraham pleads for the lives of any righteous people living there, especially the lives of his nephew, Lot, and his family. Abraham seems to negotiate with God on behalf of the righteous of the two cities. God first agrees to spare the cities if 50 righteous people can be found, and eventually agrees to spare them if 10 righteous people are found. Oh, that's nice. 2 angels appearing as men are sent to Lot in Sodom, but are met with a wicked mob who ask for the newcomers. Yeah, we want to see those people in suits. Who are they? Lot offers the mob his daughters instead. Oh. But this only further enrages the mob. Oh, hey, there you go. Who are then struck blind by the angelic guests. Finding only Lot and his family as righteous, don't know about that, among the inhabitants, the angels warn Lot to quickly evacuate the city and not look back. Similar regions. A lot of this is always about doom and gloom and some type of inevitable danger, but some people survive. Always the case. Same like how one must always survive to tell the new story. I digress. As they flee the destruction, Lot's wife looks back upon the city and is turned into a pillar of salt. Alright. Okay. Pretty dark. It's kind of like the Brothers Grimm. But righteous story, so we hold that in account. Now, in the account of the Quran, I'm not saying I've read it or anything. Again, this is just from the internet for purposes only. It states that it is quite similar in its antics, though the cities are not mentioned by name, Abraham pleads for Lot's people, but is told that the chastisement cannot be averted. Lot is grieved when the messengers tell him of the fate of his people, and in biblical narrative offers his daughters in vain to the mob. Righteous Lot is told to escape in the night with his followers, and is warned that his wife will suffer the same fate as the rest. The cities are destroyed by stones raining down. So, for this there has been many different representations between these two of what it actually means. Some relate that it's homosexuality. Some is inhospitality of God and the angels. And this is where interpretation or perception comes from. How you see it, how faithful you are, do you look between it, or is it just rewritten now to keep people in a specific ideal? But Here I want you to try and focus on the fact that the mob, this ruling mob, or let's say herd society, I want you to picture them as if they are the elites, the big corporations and businesses trying to control you and dictate you. Okay, so these are the ones here going, ah, rah, rah. Now, the so-called angels are distractions. They are something smaller, but they're here basically claiming to be false prophets. So, would you give your daughters over to this type of corruption just to keep the peace of the false prophets? Well, for one, we don't hear from the female. The wife has no say in this matter. And I don't understand why, because she bore those children. So, it's just, here, have my children, we're all safe and peaceful. And they said, no, we want to see who these people are, forget them, we want them. Okay, well, it highlights that in order for some to keep what they seem to class as value, they will sacrifice what is most important and precious to keep their own image. Like handing over your firstborn child to spin weaves of gold. I think we know where Rumpel comes from. So, let's look at it like this. No righteous man, right, would ever sacrifice his daughters, nor a woman for that matter, but they would die for them instead. Gladly, if I had any too, I would die for my brother's kids. I would die for any person's kids that aren't my own. So this is just incomprehensible. It is this meaning that we cannot give ourselves over to the distractions either, or that of unruly men to save ourselves. Because of the sins of man, it is that in the burning of this sulfur from the skies or the rocks, which can be perceived as the masculine, and the salt is the feminine, we can see there is a symbolic ego death here of pride and emotion, being emotion of the feminine side and pride of the male ego. These are those inner workings that have been laid upon us. We go down to the depths of ourselves to heal those aspects, free ourselves from those burdens, to find what is important. This happens when the truth in wisdom is met with anger and power. These stories, when hidden behind this, are they written this way? Are they told this way? How is it perceived? How is it known? So when a ruling class sees destruction and wishes to uphold this false idea of power and complexity over a free, conscious society of love, this is what happens. When taught the messages of the script, if not done wisely or symbolically, well, we're here now, aren't we? This is the whole indication of how we're supposed to understand what death and rebirth means in symbology. Don't give yourselves over to something that isn't true, that isn't of the heart. Don't give those that is most important to you away to someone just to make them happy. We do this all the time in work and business. You give the best parts of yourself over to someone only to be used again and again and again. For me, it's easy to see how things could be mistaken, though. But also how quickly one can be controlled in the name of faith, even to the most worst outcomes possible. There, however, again, is a link here between other cultures too. This same story, but of a different lot. Pun intended. And it comes from the Greek mythology of Orpheus and Eurydice. Now, for those that don't know, it's actually quite interesting. If you have watched the TV series Sandman, you'd be well aware of it. But with Orpheus, right? Orpheus married Eurydice. Eurydice got bitten by a snake and died. Short story there. She then went down into the depths of the underworld with Hades and Persephone. And Orpheus couldn't handle this. So he decided to go on a everlong journey to save his dead partner from the depths. So he went. You see, he was a harpist, had the most beautiful voice and singing wisdom all the time. So he knew full well that no man was ever allowed to visit the underworld twice, only once. And he was now on his way out of it. Furthermore, he hadn't seen Eurydice, not once. And he didn't know whether she was following him at all. He had to take Hades' word for it. Because he went down there and he sung his way to them. He sung the most beautiful ballad to them to convince them to save her soul. And there's a lot of shortcuts here. But he basically wrote a ballad, made a mixtape. They all fell in love with it and said, you can take her soul. However, there's one condition. You cannot look back. Now this looking back is the same thing that we see in Lot and his wife, where she looked back and was turned to a pillar of salt. Same principle, but different story. So in fear of that, as he was nearing the exit of the realm, in fear that he might once again lose his wife, and anxious for a single look, Orpheus turned his eyes so he could gaze upon Eurydice. Almost immediately she slipped away, and the air was all Orpheus could feel between his arms, and then stretch them out, eager to embrace and rescue the love of his life, as she flies away into the nothingness. A moment later, the walls of the underworld echoed a whisper and sorrowful farewell. And then there was only silence and despair. Excuse me. You see, Orpheus tried to go back. But this time, his singing could only soothe Charon. But not for any purpose, because the infernal boatman said no. However, for 7 days, Orpheus sat at the bank of the river Styx, nourished only by his grief and tears, until he became a voiceless skeleton. Finally, back on Earth, and for the next 3 days, he roamed his homeland, shunning all the women and spending all his time with the young men of Thrace. It was probably because of this that the Thracian women of the Maenads, resenting Orpheus for his fidelity to the ghost of Eurydice, tore him to pieces during one of their frenzied ceremonies. So basically, he couldn't get his wife back. Because he couldn't follow the belief that she was there and the trust in that she was there, he then shunned all of women entirely and said, you are no good. I'm going to spend most of my time following Apollo, following the men, loving that, and then shunning them. Not taking responsibility for his own ownership, for his own problems, for what he created. The muses basically then tore him limb from limb, saying, you don't appreciate what it was. They were just there doing the sole purpose because he couldn't do it. It is said that this was the reason why so many poets were born during these times, because he was headless, and his head went down the river, speaking songs and buried and so on and so forth. Now, I've cut that really, really short and mixed it all up there, right? The idea here is that Orpheus went to go and save the feminine. He sang a song, could be symbolic, and was approved. He opened the door to regain that feminine aspect, to find it again, to find the emotions, to unify both together, and rose with it. But on reflection, he looked back, same like Lot's wife looked back. You allowed that distraction into your life, so you went back again. But you weren't allowed to go back twice. You weren't allowed to re-enter. Now, this is the part that if symbolically I look at and say, well, I don't believe that. I believe you can re-enter. You can change and unify those aspects of yourself. But if it is your soul and creation, then it has a different meaning. You see, both of these stories have the reference, as I said, to looking back and to having faith to keep going and trusting in the divinity. Both stories have references to the company of young men over women, and in doing so create the wrath of God or demise. We see that in religious texts today. In my opinion, what does all this mean for us? I've said it before in other things that this is all knowledge. It's all ways of looking at things and how do we better ourselves? How do we allow ourselves to be more joyous? I'd say that we should not sacrifice ourselves for the joys of someone else. We shouldn't sacrifice and follow that of desired norms to appease a god or a social normality just to keep the peace, because then it isn't. I believe that the scripts were rewritten to hide the truth, but also available to those who seek it. You've heard the read between the lines mentality, but it's also what you make of it, what you believe. It doesn't have to be what somebody else thinks it actually is. We don't need those people who claim to have all the answers. We just need the ones who love us for who we are. We don't need laws to govern, just a safe space to play and grow. By removing the toxins, by removing the distractions, the lusts, the desires, and all of the crap that man has placed in front of us, we find ourselves not looking back, but we find our true self by opening the door and letting it go. And that, my friends, is simply that little slug that I saw today, telling us that we have finished, concluded. Now, this is all just my opinion. It's a long conversation to sit and listen to. Might be factual, might not be. But at the end of the day, what matters most is whether it is symbolic of the chakras, the 7 days, Craig David, the 7 chakra points to heal, maybe going up and down to fix that. Maybe it's something to do with the 7s. You have to wait 7 days and then another 3 to be enlightened. Who knows? These are all chasing ideals, chasing understandings. You can talk about how God is within us and all the scripture means left hemisphere, right hemisphere, and all of these types of things. It could be anything. What I tend to see in most of this is love is from the heart. Lead from the heart. And the more distractions we can remove from our daily life and leave them behind us, the better our life will be. So it is with that, I leave you with peace and love. Take care.